Houses of worship have been at the center of African American life since people of African descent prayed in America's original colonies. Hope emanated and strength generated where Americans, people of color, looked to a promising future and toiled to help build a strong democracy. And despite the history of bombs, murders, and affronts committed against the church bodies, families still gather. Today on Black Almanac, clergy members say they've bolstered security and programs continue. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are delighted to have you back, Reverend Lumpkin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor K, as we often call you, but Keturah Pittman, Pastor Keturah
Yes.
Pittman, and Reverend Miller. Thank you so much. Well, we're here to talk today about not only church security, but why church security isn't so important, and give people a sense of what's going on within the Black church, if you will, to raise that level of security, given that it is no surprise and not a new day when it comes to dealing with the kind of tragedies that we've been seeing around the country occurring in churches and synagogues. Why don't we start with you, Reverend Miller? Tell us a little bit about your security program.
We've had a security program in place since 2015, right after the Charleston shooting, where we put security cameras in, and we also put some protocols in place where we have a security team, as well as educated our ushers and greeters in terms of security. And
you, Reverend Pastor Pittman?
Yes, we did the same after the Charleston catastrophe, in terms of going through training for our members to understand. We participated in something the chief did and
the chief of police.
Yes, Tapino had done, in educating houses of worship as to how to protect yourselves. Yes.
So what has changed? Reverend Pastor Lumpkin, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your organization. All of you have so many programs, so this is not just a matter of on Sundays, but a matter of an everyday thing.
Yeah, well, we have a security team as well, and Light of the World is fortunate to have a number of current and retired law enforcement officers, sheriff's department, sheriff deputies, and so, and some other individuals who are armed to carry. So we formed a security team, and obviously Sunday's the big day. While we're in worship, they're roaming around the building and in the office areas. As we have a lot of doors, and making sure nobody's coming in, and making sure the doors are locked. But also our security team comes out, for noonday Bible study on Wednesdays, and we feed the homeless twice a month on Saturday mornings, and so our security team is there as well, because you just don't know who's going to be in there. Some of those individuals are mentally ill or unstable, and so on youth nights we have to have one of those security guards there just about at every gathering at Light of the World. And it's unfortunate that we have to do those things, but that's just the world that we live in. And as Pastor Miller and Pastor Pittman said, I think Charleston was a wake-up call for all of us.
Yes.
That we had to rethink and do what we have to do to protect our worshipers and make sure they have a sense of security and they're not paranoid as they're worshiping and serving.
When you mentioned that you have individuals who are on the police force and working for the sheriff's office, there is nothing to give you a sense of security like having a police car parked out in your neighborhood. We have a few.
And that's what they do. One of our police officers parks his car out, and so just that alone, I think when people see that police car parked outside of the church, probably is a deterrent.
That's a pretty good deterrent, right?
Sure
I guess
is.
that's why many of the even stores and the like have a police car.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
police are our friends many times, most times, right?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Pastor Miller, you have a lot of programs going on a regular basis also. Recently, within the last couple of weeks, you even had a voter education program going on where you had elected officials sitting in the audience, and you also had candidates for office coming in. What happens when you have those kind of programs? Do you have additional security brought onto the campus, onto the church campus?
in this particular case, we absolutely did because the number of people that were going to be there. So we had representation from the Sarasota Police Department in addition to our own security because we wanted to try to make sure it was a good atmosphere for everyone, keeping it positive. And so we worked to coordinate between the two, and it all turned out really well for everyone.
Good. And obviously no incident,
Absolutely.
otherwise that would have been what
Absolutely.
the discussion
Wonderful.
for today.
Absolutely.
So wonderful. Tell us a little bit, Pastor Pittman, you have a number of programs going on also, even on those days when you aren't holding church, if you will. Other programs are going on.
Yes, we do have several. One that we're proud of course, is our SOAR ministry. And if you've been down Links anytime soon, you'll see the new building that's going
SOAR,
up.
S-O-A-R.
SOAR, yes. And we're very proud of that program. And we have been successful when we didn't have anything but a one room. But now that we've got donors from the community, we have several buildings that are going up that's going to house our program. And of course, we've already put in place some avenues for the security and safety of not only the students that will be coming, but of course for the workers that will be on site as well.
What's going to be occurring inside that new building with the young students?
Oh, it's a tutorial program, K through third grade. And of course, we're working with those students, and the goal, of course, is to get them all on grade level. And I can boast about that several years ago, we had 100% of our students that were in the program were passing the OFCAT. So we were excited about that for several years, and we're expecting the same or even better to go on now with the FAS and everything else that's going on. With all the computers and everything else that's going to be in the facility, we are expecting bigger and greater thing of our kids.
Well, you know, we're talking about your organization doing voter education, opening the doors for voter education. You're doing educational programs. You're feeding the hungry. It just speaks to the fact that the Black church has been, for so many years, so many centuries, if you will, 2 centuries now, the heart of a community.
Absolutely.
You do more than just feed souls. You're feeding minds.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that the one commonality amongst the Black church is that it's a spirit of caring for and about other people?
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
And how does it play out in your church, Reverend Pastor Miller?
I think the Black church in general has always been an inviting place. It's certainly been the focal point of our community, both socially and spiritually. And so we've always tried to be a welcoming place for everyone, no matter who they were. And I think that spirit carries over throughout our community, so that the church always is the focal point for the African American community, no matter what city you're in.
And as we talk about that change, none of these churches are churches where we only see African Americans.
Oh, no.
I have had the great fortune
Absolutely.
of sitting in the church, all 3 of you all's organizations, and on any given day,
Absolutely.
at
It's a
any
diverse,
organization,
yes.
it's very diverse.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
And that's happening. Do you think it's a sign that we as Americans generally are finding our way in terms of some tolerance, in terms of some genuine integration? You know, it's been said oftentimes that the church is the last bastion, if you will. When you see people sitting in church together, praying together, that's a good sign.
Amen. Yes. It has been.
I hope so. Oh, I'm sorry, Pastor.
Okay, it's just been said so long that the 11 o'clock hour on Sunday is the most segregated hour. But we're seeing that torn down daily now, that not only do we have from our community going to the other churches, but we have the same thing coming to ours as well. So we really want to dispel that out time that churches, especially because they're in our community, are segregated. That's not the case.
And Pastor Lumpkin, you were about to say?
Well, to your point, our church is becoming more and more diverse. I'm not even really sure why. I thank God for it. But I'm hoping that's a sign of good things for our country. Sometimes I think we're taking a step backwards when I listen to the rhetoric out of Washington, out of the White House. I wonder, have we taken some steps backwards? But then when I look at the congregation on Sunday mornings, I'm encouraged that maybe we are getting past some of our racial wounds and stuff. And so, you know, the Black church, it's a great thing, what we do. Of course, our makeup is still predominantly African American, but that's not only what makes us a Black church. It's the community we're committed to serving. We're committed to serving our community, the Black community, Newtown community, and there are more and more people outside of our community who want to partner and be a part of that.
Absolutely.
To help bring about change. So it's really an exciting, interesting time. I know for our church, and I'm sure for Bethlehem and Greater Hurst as well.
When talking about change and opening doors, your church, we call it oftentimes Light of the World, but it's more than Light of the World. You've got international in your proper name also, right?
Yeah. Well, I always say to our church, if we can master our community, God's going to send us to the world. And we can, we want to, obviously our priorities here, but just today there's a church that we partner with in Haiti that wants us to help restructure their church. And so we're doing some things outside of the country as well, and we're trying to live up to that name. But our burden is the Newtown area in Sarasota. And so we want to change, and which is a part of the world. So we want to play our part in God's kingdom and helping bring about impact in the world, whether that world is here or in Haiti or wherever else. So
that's a big reach in terms of being able to have impact. Now, Pastor Miller, you are pastoring one of the oldest churches, particularly African American churches, but generally one of the oldest churches in Sarasota. Tell us a little bit about the history of Bethlehem.
Bethlehem is the second oldest church in Sarasota. It was founded by Lewis Colson, who was the first African American in Sarasota. And so we've got a long, rich history going all the way back to 1896, in which we've been the focal point for not just spiritual activities, but also for community activities, things that such as social programs. Mary McLeod Bethune came to speak many years back. Bethlehem's got a long, as I said, rich history in terms of being socially involved in all that takes place in Sarasota.
And that must have been quite an honor having Mary McLeod Bethune come to the sanctuary. Mary McLeod Bethune being the founder of Bethune-Cookman, once college, now university. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and there was clearly times when those black institutions would be at the black church or the black university, the black college. That was one's only choice, if you could consider that a choice. But one of the things that I hear that has always been a commonality, it seems, is that the doors have always been open to all people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of a misnomer in terms of calling it the black church, because I think in general, African American people have always been embracing of every color. And so I don't view us as being a black church as such. I think we try to show a welcoming face to any and every person, and as has already been stated by Pastor Lumpkin, I look out on Sunday morning and I see a diverse group that's growing ever more diverse. I think as the community becomes more diverse, we become a reflection of the community in which we live, and so we certainly want to reflect that in everything that we do.
Simply the name of our denomination, African, so often make people think we only want to serve people of African descent, but that's not the case, of course. We do have diversity throughout our connectional church. So I don't want anybody to feel because we are African Methodist Episcopal that we only are serving those people of African descent, not at all.
Well, I imagine that some of that, and I'm not a biblical scholar, but I imagine that some of that goes back to our history, because there have been times in this country's history where black people and Caucasian people could not worship together. It was not an option, just like we could not go to school together. We couldn't sit down and eat together. We couldn't live in the same neighborhood. So I imagine that some of that is the outgrowth of where we have started in this country.
That's how our church, our denomination, did start out of that protest.
I think the one key difference is that we couldn't worship in white churches, but to Reverend Miller's point, we've always been open to people of other races, whether we could go to theirs or not. And we all have diverse churches, and I'm grateful for that. Our church is really growing more and more diverse. I'm not even really sure why. But yet I still love the traditions of the black church. And I think what makes us a black church is the songs, the style, the way the preacher closes the sermon. You know, I'm not ashamed of those things. And we had a camera crew in Sunday. filming a documentary, but it didn't change how I preached. I'm still an African American Pentecostal preacher. That's how I close a sermon. And so I think the way we worship is rich and style. I think others are appreciating our style of worship and the way we do. Of course, our songs are diverse at times, but still the core of who we are is who we are. And I'm very proud of that, the traditions of the Black church. And as we change and go through evolutions, I believe we got to make some changes, but I think we ought to preserve some of those things and some of those songs and some of those ways. I think that's what makes us who we are, and I think more and more folk are appreciating that and realizing that. So do we have to make some changes? And I struggle with that. What does this mean for how we go about worshiping now that we're becoming so more and more diverse? And do we make some changes? Probably so, but at the core, I think we got to be who we are and be proud of that. Everybody else is, so we can be proud of who we are as well.
And music is so important in the church. Now, I remember even as a kid, some of us wanted to be in the choir just so that we could get out of the house and have a place to go where we knew if we said, can I be in the choir and go sing? You were always going to get the nod, yes. Whereas if we said, can we go over here to this party? That'd be an entirely different thing. So the church has certainly had its doors open, but music is so important. Even if you compare it, if you will, to, for instance, Black colleges, where historically Black universities and colleges where music has been so important, the battle of the bands. And we have the same kind of things within the church community when it comes to choirs and, singing as a way of telling the word. Tell us about your choir, if you would.
I call them the fire choir because we have a great choir. The music ministry is obviously very important to all of our churches, especially our church is no different. And the choir is grown, and I think they do a great job. Well, we have a number of choirs. We have a kind of a senior choir, for lack of a better term, that sings a kind of a different brand, older gospel, and then we have our main choir that kind of singing the top 40 songs, and youth choir, and I think it's a good balance, and even the men's group, and I think between them all we get a really good mix of worship where we can kind of touch everybody. So it's kind of hard as the church grows more diverse, and not just culturally, but multi-generational. It's trying to find a worship style where everybody can get in, and so our music ministry, I think, has done an amazing job at balancing our worship, a little something old, new, and I think we have a great experience on Sunday morning. So I'm really proud of them, and they're a big part of why we're growing. I know that. So.
And you're a big part of it too. I've seen you on the keyboard.
Well, I'm semi-retired from that. I only play in emergencies now. They got me in retirement, but every once in a while I have to come out of retirement and dust the fingers off and play a little bit. But to your point, having a pastor who plays and has been a choir director before is probably good and bad. So every missed note, I'm looking at them crazy, and they're looking at me, and I'm fussing, or I'm probably more involved in the music ministry than the average pastor because I can hear it, and so I don't micromanage anything, but I do offer my opinion freely at times. So I hope that ultimately, I try not to bother them too much, but I hope that makes us better ultimately because I do play.
Well, if it helps at all, many of us sitting in the audience don't have a clue that you might be off note. So
I can hear every chord change, and I'm looking like, what was that? So.
Well, you talk about having partnerships with churches in Haiti. This is a small community when it comes to ministering to people, and everybody talks. So you've just come back from a conference lately, right? Tell us a little bit about that conference.
Well, that's our annual conference that we go to each year, which is the hub of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Methodism in itself. But at that particular conference, of course, we have to give a report of everything that we've done for the year. And the culmination of that, of course, is our bishop makes pastoral assignments, because we, unlike them, we're only assigned a year at a time. Okay, so I've been assigned to Hearst Chapel now for my 7th time. Okay, so, but there are others.
And what were you bragging about while you were at that conference? When you say, what have you done over the last year? What were you bragging about?
Oh, I was totally bragging about our health ministry, which has really grown a lot. We've opened what's called an elder management program, that we have our nurses there that are working with the elders, not only in the church, but in the community as well, assisting them with things, helping them in many ways, or bragged about that.
Well, since 60 is the new 40, what do you call elder now?
Oh, elder management would really, they basically work with those persons who are Social Security and older. So, but that has been working well for us. And nurses that are assisting our seniors, not only just our seniors, but as well those in the community with finding, understanding the healthcare problem, assisting them with things related to housing and otherwise. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of, that elder management program.
So are you bringing information about senior housing, about
All of that.
diabetes
They are-
management?
yes, and in fact this Sunday is what we call ID Day all everywhere. Our emphasis is on diabetes, and we'll have church on the outside for that, and we do have people on hand that will be doing A1C checks and everything like that for diabetes, since that is a silent killer in our communities. So, yes.
And Pastor Miller, what do you have coming up soon?
Well, we actually just finished celebrating our 122nd anniversary just a couple of weeks ago. We've done a lot of things in terms of missions. We've got a lot going on in terms of that. We're actually just completing some supplies that we're going to be sending to Liberia, some things that we're sending to the island of Grenada. That'll be done in the next couple of weeks as well. We've just sent some things to North Carolina as well as to North Florida for those who suffered from the hurricanes. So we've been doing quite a bit in terms of our outreach missions and things of that sort.
And how did you get connected with the out of the country people in need?
Actually, we have a member who was on a mission trip to Grenada earlier this summer. And so she came back with a burning desire to try to do some things to help them. And so we thought it was something that we definitely wanted to be a part of. In terms of the Liberia missions, we actually denominationally, we're supporting some missions over there. And so that's part of our effort to try to help those who are far less fortunate than we are. So.
Excellent, excellent. So in terms of, we talk about the black church, it's almost become, or not almost, it really is a phrase, kind of a catch-all for essentially whenever people of African descent gather and worship and look for the future. But there's certainly some commonalities and some differences. Tell us, educate us a little bit about the differences. You are AME.
Yes.
Your church has Baptist, although I've noticed that you've kind of changing the name, going through a transition to be Bible. Yes?
Well, we're a non-denominational church. I don't really know how you categorize us, because when you look at our membership, the makeup is pretty interesting. I was raised in the Pentecostal Holiness Church here in Sarasota, but I had a defining moment when I went to Bethune-Cookman. I played for a missionary Baptist church for a while. So that really had a great influence on me in my preaching style and music style and everything. And so our church is a melting pot of, we got former missionary Baptists, Pentecostal, even some former Catholics. So, I probably still, those Pentecostal flavors still come out of me, I'm sure, in preaching, but I'm kind of a mixture, of that missionary Baptist and Pentecostal. So whatever that mix is, seems to be appealing to folks. But the bottom line is we're celebrating Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And trying to serve the community.
Is that kind of like being an independent voter? I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a registered Republican,
Well,
I'm an independent.
Kind of, sort of. Only in this respect is when it comes to our doctrine and what we believe is definitely orthodox and rooted out of those experiences. And actually, believe it or not, growing up in the Holiness Church and playing for Missionary Baptist Church, our doctrine really wasn't really different, much different. Might have been some emphasis on other things other than that, but we are Bible believing, and I'm a Bible preacher, and that's all I'm going to preach. So, in that respect, I'm orthodox as anybody else. Yes. But there's some benefits and drawbacks to not being connected. There are times I miss being a part of Connectional Church, And then there's sometimes it's a great benefit. I have to send this financial report there or anything like that. I don't have to worry about the bishop sending me anywhere else. So there's some pros and cons to it, but it's what's worked best for the Light of the World Church, and so it's a good thing for us. So being independent. Yeah.
And Pastor Miller, so you've gone from being calling it Bethlehem Baptist, but you are now Bethlehem Bible?
It's a DBA. As a technical matter, we're still Bethlehem Baptist Church. However, we went through a period where we recognized that people weren't joining the church because it was a Baptist church. And so we made a conscious decision to change the name to Bethlehem Bible Church. From a doctrinal standpoint, nothing has changed. From a connectional standpoint, nothing has changed. It's more about how we present ourselves to the greater community. And we want to make sure that people understand that when you come to be a part of us, it's not about a denomination one way or another. It's about having a meeting and a transformative encounter with Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And so that's what we want to offer people, not denominationalism. We want to offer them Jesus.
And I don't think we ever stand up and preach denomination. We stand up and preach Christ. So regardless of who comes through the door, whether it's AME, whether it's Baptist, or whether it's a non-denominational, the word is the same.
So that is what it's about.
Absolutely.
Taking care of people, sharing some commonality as it regards being our brothers and our sisters, caregivers and keepers as necessary.
Absolutely.
So we do have a
Absolutely.
bright future. People need not be fearful about coming into faith-based organizations, coming into churches, because it sounds like you have a very high level of awareness about security, and you've got programs in place to give people a sense of you can pay attention and not have to constantly look over one's shoulder.
Yeah, and I want to actually believe that any church, regardless of whether it's predominantly African American church or Caucasian church, is going to be a welcoming environment.
Yes.
I can only speak for my experiences, and I want to be able to just communicate that to any and every person, that no matter where I've been, I've never been to an African American church that was not inviting. I think there is a great capacity among our folks to love, to forgive, to embrace, regardless of whatever the past has been. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not hurts and they're not scars, but I think there's a capacity there to love and look beyond.
Well, thank you for that. We hate to go, but you know that you will be back.
Absolutely.
And if there's one thing that we talk about oftentimes is that wherever we are, that's where the church is. So it sounds
Amen.
like we have had church
Amen.
today.
Amen.
So
Amen.
thank you all for joining us. And as I said, we are going to certainly have you back on Black Almanac. And thank you, Suncoast. I'm Renee James Gilmore for Black Almanac.
There's a lot of fear in coming back to school. I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but one of the teachers was Miss Araceli. She gave me direction. Every single time I had a question, she'll put down whatever she's doing and she'll sit there with you until you get it. 50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Are you a food lover, restaurant goer, or home cook? Then check out My Suncoast Dining on mysuncoast.com, your guide to the foodie lifestyle. ABC 7's own Chef Judy serves up her favorite recipes, cooking tips and trends, dining blogs, and helpful step-by-step videos. And you'll love the restaurant guide with direct links to your favorite Suncoast eateries. Whether you're cooking in or dining out, whet your appetite with tasty tips from Chef Judy at mysuncoast.com/dining. ABC 7 News at 7, weeknights.